Shalom, Chaverim, Shalom. This is Yadon. Shalom. So right here. Let's talk about precepts. Some of the precepts here in the Torah reading and feedings here in the Shemester. Yes, Yeshua Shalom, Chaverim. Yes. LOJ, here. Awo.
Lion of Judah Society.
Rastafari, Israelites. What Babylon feel like? I and I, Rastafari, the Israelites. So, here. Greetings. We, the black Jews of the line of the tribe of Judah. So, let's talk about the precepts right here. It's very good to see a lot of them and them, growing their bread and the precepts, just on that outer, the outer show right there, but even more especially studying HaTorah, right? Studying the Torah, Yahweh's directions, instruction, HaKadosh, Baruch Hashem, the Holy One, blessed be He, blessed be the name. So right here, we was going over the beard and, doing a little bit of research. Part of this is a research video, but also some discoveries we like to share right here. So we have, the brother on the left hand of the screen right there, full beard, he grows out his wool, has like a kind of an afro, I guess we would call it. Yeah, well, that's what they would call it, like a fro. It's called a fro right there. Hebrew, the Hebrew, Afro-Shemitic language. That's what Hebrew is, the African Shemitic language. Don't know. But here, and the brother on the left, or, the man on the left, we see he's shaving. Right? He's shaving right there. All right, so let's zoom out right here. So we see on one side is what we would call law or Torah, the directions, instruction. A soul without instruction is headed for self-destruction. So here. And now on the right-hand side, we see chet, in the Hebrew, the chet. What is chet? Chet is sin. So here we have Leviticus chapter 19, verse 27. This is our focus verses. And Leviticus chapter 21, verse 5. All right, so we're going to just begin off right here. It's a little vid, on the precept, of the beard, the beard, because what we see is there's a lot of Israelite and Israelite orientated, brothers and others influenced by, the Israelites, and the doctrine, the teaching, and what's in social media, who are growing their beard. And this is a good, it's a good sign, because something on the outer that we can see, it's a good sign. Right, according to HaTorah, right? Just to begin with the Torah, right? The direction, instructions, right? Let me show you some of the exhibits right here quickly. All right, so right here we have the the beard, right? The beard. So let's get some basic terms right here. Let's bring this up right here. Some basic terms right here for the beard. So here, we look at beard in the KJV, using the KJV as a basic point of reference from low degree, or basic study. And then we get into the Masoretic, get to the source code in the Hebrew, and the Ivrit, the Yehudit. So here we have Leviticus. If a man or woman, now we thought this verse is interesting. Let's read it. If a ish or a isha, if a ish, right, a man, a ish, or a isha, a woman contextually could be a wife, a woman, like my woman, wife, or isha. So if a man, a ish or isha, have a plague upon the head or the beard, and the plague here, I'd like to share this, we didn't do the vid just yet, but we definitely need to clip farm some of our longer podcasts. So brothers and sisters, please feel free to kind of clip farm. There may be some clips when we go into certain teachings on the evening podcast and the Torah reading and feeding and the reasonments, which might be worthy in and of themselves. And also, please feel free to share, the content in content. In context, the content in context. Please feel free to share that, for the co-laborers, chabarim. But here we have the nega, right? So in the Hebrew enunciate is the nega. That's how it would sound, right? In ancient biblical Hebrew, the nega. The nega, right? The N word, right? But here we have the nega. Now, here, this section here in Leviticus is speaking about the nega and tzarat. Nega and tzaraat. The nega and tzaraat. The nega sarat. We call it the nega sarat, right? Beware of the nega sarat. What's the nega sarat? The nega sarat, tzaraat, is the plague of leprosy, right? And we have to bring this out here on like RastafariJews, where we go into a little bit of a reasonment and a presentation and a teaching, sometimes topical, right? We do it on the podcast as well, but since we go like for sometimes 2 to 3, even up to 4, almost sometimes 5 hours, sometimes on some of our podcasts, there's a lot of content there, right? A lot of very good content, right? So really calling for the co-laborers and the team, the LOJ, Line of Judah, LOJ team to assist us, right? But here, let's zoom in on this point right here.
Lion of Judah Society.
So here in Leviticus chapter 13, verse 29, right, to get a basic context, get the Hebrew words, the biblical Hebrew. So here we have the nigga, nigga, because the ayin is a hard sound. There's a soft a, aleph, the ah, there's the ah, and there's the ah. It's a guttural, right? It's a manly guttural sound. Nigga. So what is the nigga? Beware of the nigga. What's a nigga? Now it's interesting how this word has been used, especially as a byword against the once lost now found Beit Yisrael. The Beit Yisrael against the Beta Israel. Right? So here this is a stroke. It's a plague. It's a disease. The plague is a disease. It's a mark. It's like a plague spot. The nigga. Right? The nigga, a stroke, a wound. Right? A stroke in the metaphorical sense, or when we say the allegorical sense, right? Of disease. Excuse that. Of disease. Let me take a sip right here. Here we go. But in the context here in Leviticus chapter 13, it's a mark, right, of leprosy or of tzaraat, of leprosy, right, of leprosy. Interesting how this goes right here. So do niggers have the nega, tzarat? Is that the real disease here concerning the N-word, right? So here, Strong's definition, bringing out as a blow. Figurative, in a figure of speech, it's like an infliction. Notice it says infliction, not affliction, right? But an in, something within, an infliction. Now the implication of this is a spot. Now in the Torah reading and feeding here in the Sefer Vayikra, right? The Sefer Vayikra in Leviticus, the third book of Moshe, is brought out as leprosy and the leprous person. So it could be leprosy, the nigga can be the person, nigga, and the nigga can be the dress. Right, so here's the first place we have beard in the scripture. So here it says if a man, a ish, right, or a isha, or a woman have a nega upon the rosh. Now rosh in the Hebrew, rosh means head. Now rosh in the Afro-Shemitic, the Shemitic languages, is related to like ras. We have ras in Amharic for the head, literally for head, right? Ras, right? The head, right? It can be used in some context of like the head of a man is the rosh of a man. So in the Amharic we have ras. In the Arabic we have rais. In the Gu'as we have ri'is. But here in the Hebrew we have rosh, right? So this context here, it's the head, right? The head of a man, or respectively the head of a woman. But then it says this right here, upon the head, right? Or the beard. So the beard here we have as a zakan. So here we see zakan. We have the zakan, the beard or the chin. Now this word both means, depends on the context. So for a woman, yeah, some women might have facial hair. They say that, they say that so-called black women might have more testosterone than other women, There's a manly aspect. That's a whole other reason right there. Not all, but still, it is said. But the context here, more correctly, as we study the source code right here, right, is the beard or the chin, right? So if a man has it upon his head, or a woman, the nega, if they're the nega, if they're the nigga on the head, the nigga in the head, the nigga mentality, the nega, right? Or on the zakan. So for the man, the zakan is usually the beard, right? Or the zakan can also be the chin, right? So more particularly with the woman, the chin. So we have the word for beard is the zakan. So here we have the H2206, right? The zakan. So zakan is both the beard, usually in this sense the beard, right? Or the chin. The beard or the chin. Now this is from zakain in the Hebrew, zakain. What is zakain? Zakain, this is the verb. So that was the noun right there, zakan, the noun. Zakain, right, is the verb to be old in that sense, to become old, right? To grow old, to show, but also the context is to show age, right? To show age, right? To be old. Now, this doesn't mean old, but a kind of a sense of maturity, right? Maturity. Now, why are we going into this right here? Because we want to put this into context. So Leviticus chapter 13 is speaking all about the nigga, the plague, right? The nigga. Now the nigga can be like a physical, wound or stroke or mark or disease, right? But they also can apply in a kind of an inner sense, because remember it's the infliction, right? What afflicts one within, and it's the mark of leprosy. Now notice that with the Bnei Yisrael here in Leviticus, this whole chapter and these chapters here in Leviticus is speaking about leprosy. Now we don't have to go through that again right here, but leprosy and the examples that is given in the scripture, right? Like with Moshe, right? He puts his hand in his bosom, brings it out, it's white as snow. He puts his hand and turns into the other flesh. So that means it must have been other than being white as snow. And Miriam, right, when she had spoken evil, right, of Moshe, Miriam, and a brother Aaron, no doubt, was like going along with his, I'm going to say big sis, but you know what I'm saying? We have that in Numbers as well, right? So not to make this about that right there, but it's very interesting. Now, even in this verse right here with the yellow here, Leviticus 13:30, we have the Sahob. What is the Sahob? Sahob is like gleaming, or the sense of like a yellowish color, like gleaming yellow hair. So here we have blonde hair connected. Now, science teaches us that in certain senses of recessiveness, that from the dominant gene, the so-called black gene, can come the so-called white. Right? Now, science has shown and proven that there's a lot of research and evidence that points to a truism concerning that right there, right? I know people may personally disagree, so forth and so on, but if you create it all from one, as it says, or from one man, then we have to consider what that one original man was, and therefore we can get different levels of variation. You know what I'm saying? Along from the dominant, we can get the recessive, right? And this is what these chapters are speaking about right here, especially Leviticus chapter 13. So here's the word for leprosy, sara'at. Now one will say, Ras, Yadin, isn't this right here supposed to be about the beard? Right? Are you speaking of the precepts and the beard? Well, yes. But it's important to understand the dis-ease. See, because the truth is an offense, but it's not a sin. It's not a chet. It's not a missing. You're not going to be caught lacking if you know the truth. Ye shall what? Know the truth. Robenu, Yeshua, our rabbi, the rabbi of rabbis, Yeshua HaNotzri, Jesus of Nazareth says, ye, speaking to we, shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Right? So here, often we look at leprosy, it's often looked at as just like a physical thing. We're seeking to apply this from the physical, from the low degree, proverbially speaking, right, to the inner sense, concerning the soul, the mind, the psychic state, the soul, people getting psyched out by the world, flesh, and satanic seclorum, and then also the spiritual, right, the spiritual aspects, right? So here, what's interesting about leprosy, it can be in people. Notice it says in people, right? It can be a malignant skin, or skin disease, more properly translated, sara'at, as skin disease. Right? It can also appear in clothing. Some liken it to a mildew or a mold, right? And also in buildings, right? As a mildew or a mold, right? So here, right? So now we have these here, and here now, what's interesting, we get to Leviticus chapter 14, verse 9, concerning one who has this negasarat, the negasarat, one who has a negasarat, right, which is the plague of leprosy, right? Could that also be expressed as like colorism, certain diseases, right? Now note this right here, that this was connected, this Torah, this direct instruction, is revealed to the Israelites after they come out from Mitzrayim, which is interesting, right? But it shall be on the seventh day that he shall shave all his hair. So the one who is cleansed, for example, right? Here's what they'll do. They'll shave all their hair, right? Shave off his hair, all his hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows, even all his hair, he shall shave off. He shall wash his clothes. Also, he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean. Right? So before we get to the beard instruction, we have the beard mentioned in these three verses: Leviticus 13:29, 13:30, and here 14:9. Now, what's interesting about the last one is this complete shaving of the hair from off the head, from the beard, right? Even it says the eyebrows, even all his hair, is very much connected with like the consecration of the priest as well, where they must also kind of shave, like when they are initiated within to the priest's order, is similar right here with what is done, right, with the leper that is cleansed in the day of his, we could say, cleansing, right. And that's what it says, he shall be clean, right. So if there's a disease, right, as a regulation, the hair is shaved off. Now, here's where we go right here. Rubber meets the road right here. So Leviticus 19:27, you shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. Right? And this verse here, Leviticus 21:5, they shall not make, speaking about the Bnei Yisrael, in the covenant, right? We have to remember that this is all about the Brit, right? It's all about the covenant. In the covenant, right? They shall not make baldness, right? Baldness upon their head. They shall not make korcha. There's korcha, right? Korcha, and there's korcha, or korcha, right? That's baldness, right? Baldness from karach. In fact, we have the crazy bald head, right? We call the crazy bald head Torah portion concerning korach, right? Korah, right? Korah, the ain't right Israelites, right? Korah. Right? But what we're seeking to say right here is that some Israelites have focused a lot on the beard, right? On the beard. and have felt that they were keeping, right, this right here, especially Leviticus 19:27, what a year, 19:27, and 21:5, right, 21:5. Now let's go to our exhibits right here, right, concerning the Zakan, right, the Zakan, right, Zakan, right, the beard, right, because one without one, if you're without a beard, right, remember how the Zakan from Zakain, and that meant as a verb, Zakain, to be old or to be mature or to show age, to show maturity. Because without one, you're either a woman. What does the beard do? The beard distinguishes, right, man, right, and also maleness. Now we know that different peoples, grow, is said to grow beards differently. There's some peoples, that might not, even certain Africans that might not really grow beards, right, so well, and this is a whole interesting research there. But according to the Hebrew, right, the Hebrew faith and HaTorah, Yahweh's direction, instruction, right, a beard, what does a beard signify? A beard signifies maturity, right? Because without one, you're either a woman, an Isha, a child, right? Your child, you're too young to grow. You know what I mean? Like they even say with maturity in children is when they start to get body hair, right? That's one sign, right? As children begin to mature, even into puberty, so forth and so on, right? So without a beard, right? Now speaking of a male, without a beard, right? One is either a woman, right? A child, right? Or both. Now, this is why, because one might say, well, why is the beard significant? And it is interesting to see, many more, we say Israelites, and many more brothers, and ones, considering this particular precept, right? Not just by itself, right? But hopefully along with other precepts. So here we go right here. Now, we picked up on this meme right here. Right, this is not against the brother or whatnot, but using this as an object lesson right here. Here we have Leviticus 19:27, where it says, ye. Now, ye means like you all. Like we would say, you all, use. We say use. You shall not round the corners of your heads. Right? You shall not round the corners of your heads. Neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. Grow your beard, brothers. So you see at the bottom right there, it's grow your beard, brothers. Yes. Grow your beards. Achim. Achai. Brothers, my brothers. Yes. Ami. Right? It says, say to your brothers, Ami, my people. Yes, grow your beards. But also, you see this right here? At the top, this is from Leviticus, you see where it says Leviticus 19, right? 19:27, right? Chapter 19, verse 27. What does it read? Ye, use, or y'all, you all shall not, you all brothers, you all shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. Now, what does this meme say right here? The meme says right here, it says, grow your beard, right? You see what it says, grow your beard, brothers, right? Grow your beard, brothers. And this is from a site called, right at the bottom, americasbestpicks.com, right? So notice the beard. It's a beautiful beard. It's a nice full beard, right? No problem with the beard. But the command up here, it says what? Y'all shall not round the corners of your heads, right? Y'all see? Do y'all see? Do y'all see what I see? Notice right here. You see this part right here? We're going to zoom in right there. It's that part between the ear and the head. Now, notice the word of the command, right, says what? Not to round the corners, right? Not to round the corner. It says not to round, right? It says not to round the corners. Notice it says the corners. Notice how it reads. It's the corners of your heads, right? Neither shalt thou mar the corners of thy beard. So this word of the command is not like, well, you can do the first part, well, not round the corners of your heads, and then you mar the corners of your beard, or you do the second part, right? Right? You don't mar the corners of your beard, but you round the corners of your heads, right? And I was seeing this. I said, wow, look at all these pictures. IUIC be putting up a lot of pictures and some very good memes and things out there, right? You know, no hate on our Israelite, our Israelite potential brothers, right? Right there. But you notice that section right there. There is something going on. What's that? The fade. They say, oh, that's a fade. Well, we know what the barber calls it. And this is not to even get into with the barbers then. They have their job, so forth and so on. But, even among Orthodox Yehudim, right, they even have their own Orthodox barbers. So a person can make, their money even as a barber, you know what I mean, and still observe Torah, both for themselves and also in what they offer, right, to their customers. Now, of course, we're not saying that you have to force this on people who are not in the covenant, not Israelite. We're not speaking to that. We're just seeking to make some basic points here and to use as examples. So when I saw this, I said, chant. I mean, right here, it's now ones will say, well, what is the corner of thy beard? Right? What is the corner? That's what some people say. Like when Messiah, and when the teachers of Torah said, to love thy neighbor. I mean, you have ones that ask, well, who is my neighbor? Right? What you mean? Who is my neighbor? But notice it didn't say, don't round the corners of your head, grow your beard, brothers. It didn't say that. Right? Don't round the corners of your heads. I mean, yes, it says at the top, but here it says grow your beard. So there's a focus on the beard. Let's go over here. All right. Now this is one of the IUIC, fair use, IUIC. And you can see on the side it says beard. Right? The Zakan, beard. Another beautiful beard right there. Right? Remind me of some of the artifacts of archaeology, some of the ancients, that full sort of beard. You know what I'm saying? That kind of full beard right there. Right? So let's zoom in on the quote right up here. Right? Let's zoom in on the quote. Right? So it's the King James Version, Leviticus 21:5. They shall not make baldness upon their heads. Right? Neither shall they shave off the corners of their beard, nor make any cuttings in their flesh. This is in Leviticus 21:5. These are our two main verses. Let's look at the beard. The beard is beautiful there. The beard is full and beautiful. Let's notice that right there, the beard. You see what I'm saying? The beard. But then let's zoom in over here, right? When we zoom in over here, you see the corners. Where's the corners? The corners are gone, right? Now, I know some of y'all will think the corners are down here. No, that's not the corners, right? So you might have to go into, you can see that they made this rounding of the beard. You see right there, the rounding. Now, it doesn't say not to round your beard, but notice the word. It says to mar the corners, right? Marring the corners, right? And rounding the corners, right? There's some hairstyles, who's going to get into that in a little more detail right here. Like I know the barbers, sometimes ones might have a widow's peak, what they call a widow's peak. Is that what they call it? The widow's peak? And they will round that off. Many barbers do that. You know what I mean? And I mean, they're very skillful. These are artists. The barbers are artists, no doubt about it. All right? But here we're talking about Torah. We're not talking about one's art, one's craft, one's occupation. And more power to, the righteous barbers, and ones who do righteous and who are righteous and seek to do righteous hairstyling, especially for the righteous, right? Because this is speak to the children of Israel. Right? That's the theme here. But as you can clearly see, I don't know if you can make it out right there. You can clearly see where something's going on here, like in the other pictures, where the sides of the head is rounded. It's like a fade, right? I know this is what we call it today, right? But that's what it says, broad is the way, right, that lead to destruction, but narrow is the gate that leads to life, right? Moshiach says that few find it. Hopefully, ones will find this truth and get to know this truth for themselves, right? 'Cause I know a lot of the brothers are very zealous, right, and a lot of the camps about the beard and about these precepts, as ones should be. But let's look at the full precept. Once again, this meme here from IUIC is focused strictly on the beard. This one over here, right, is also focused on the beard. So there's a lot of focus on the beard, right? It says in Leviticus 19:27, y'all shall not round the corners of your heads. But look at the corners over here, the fade, right? The fade over here, right? And then look at this over here. And this over here where it comes to the top part of the ear, right? And it gets faded right there. And then you see all that's lightly faded right there, right? You know, it's slightly faded right there, right? It doesn't say anything about the corners. What it says, let's go back to the verse again, right? You should not round the corners of your head. The corners. So we have to establish what is the corners, all right? Just right off, this is like the temple area right here, the temple, right? That's why they call it temples, right? And it's on the sides. You can say the corners, the sides, right? You can see the beard, right? So there's two corners that we have here, right, in this verse. We have the corners of the beard, or the corners of your head, firstly, the corners of the head, the rosh, and we have the corners of the beard, right? Great beard, full beard, right? But what about the corners there, right? See, we can't have 1 foot in the kingdom, 1 foot out, right? Either we in or we out, right? So here, this is why we're doing this particular vlog right here, speaking on the beard, right? You know, Israelites growing their beards, right? But still rounding the corners, right? Still rounding the corners and marring the corners, right? Right? The negah, and sarat. Now, here, this asks a question right here. What does Leviticus 19:27 really mean? Now, this is a different translation. Do not cut the hair at the sides of your head. Uh-oh. Now, this brings it out even much more clear, doesn't it? Or clip off the edges of your beard. But now notice something, right? Up at top, it uses sides. Bottom, it uses edges. Let's go back to the source code right here, right? And here in this source code, you should not round, right? Knock off, strike off. Knock off is to strike off or to go around, to compass. It's like to make a circle, right? To compass around, to make round, right? Knock off. To strike with more or less force, to knock together, we got the idea, the compass, right? Round, right? But look at the word corner. Corner here we have peah. The corner, the edge, the side. Notice right here, we have quarter. So the word quarter, right? The quarter, right? The quarter of your head, right? They say 4 quarters make $1, right? Like we have the 4 quarters of the earthly plane, right? And therefore the entire earthly plane, you know, right? The 4 quarters, right? The extremity, the corner or the side. So let's look at this over here. Over here it says what? It says do not cut the hair at the sides of your head, right? But then in the second part it says clip off the edges, right, of your beard. No, not the edges, but the sides, in the same sense. Because remember, here in this verse right here is the KJV, and here with the Strong's reference, we can get to the key words, right? Of your what? Of your rosh of your head, right? Thou shalt not mar shachat. Shachat is destroy. Shachat is to corrupt. Shachat, to go, to ruin, to decay. Shachat, right? Shachat, right? To spoil, to ruin, right? I know nowadays it looks like a style, but if you're going to say, well, I'm gonna grow my beard because Torah says, right, this is what a man of Israel should have. How do we ignore the other part? Right? So to mar, that's the operative word. Mar what? The corners. So here we have the same word for both of them, right? The peya, right? So we're speaking about the side. Yes, it can be translated as the edges, but what we're talking about is the consistency of thought. We have the corners of the head, of the rosh, and we have the corners of the zakan, the beard, right? So here, and asking this question right here from Leviticus 19:27. What does Leviticus 19:27 really mean? This is what we're exploring right here, Chaverim, right? The beard, right? Okay, we saw this one here. It was interesting, right? So let's bring this out to show what is that marring. We see it over here, right? Right? This translation says, do not cut the hair at the sides of your head. You see this up there, the examples in the circle, right? You can see those examples. Or clip off the edges of your beard, right? This is similar to what we just showed you right there. Now we're showing you examples. Here's some examples of it, right? You can see this example right there, right? So ones might say, oh, look, you don't have a beard, right? Right? But you grow a beard and you still are marring the sides or the quote corners, the peya, right? The peya of your rosh, right? And also the peya of your beard, the edges, the sides of your beard, as we already show, right? Where is the sideburns? What happened to the sideburns? People don't like no sideburns. Oh, you think that Yahweh Eloheinu created us, right, according to the pattern of man that can grow sideburns. You can grow a beard, and yet you grow the beard, and then you do something like this over here. Let's show that right here. You see what's happened to, you see the side over there. You see the side? Let's scroll in right above the ear and on the side of the head. You see it right there. And then let's scroll over here, right? The same thing going on over there, right? So you see how the beard is kind of faded off there to go with the fade in the side of the head. Notice that in both it says corner, corner, side, side. So the marring of the corner of the beard and the marring of the corner of the head is what we see here. Even though the main focus is on the beard, right? The beard, right? So the command wasn't just speaking to the beard, but was speaking to the head, right? It's speaking to the head and the beard and how the head and the beard, right, go together, right? Because some would want to know, well, what does this mean? What about this? Here we have this example. This is mainly focusing on not the beard, but this is mainly focusing on the head. Look, over here, I think that may be a woman, right? The sides are totally, there's no sideburns, right? There's no side. We're not even saying that she should have no beard, but you know what I'm saying? But look what's done to here, right? This is a Gentile. I used to call it like a Philistine style, right? It's like a Philistine style. It's a very Gentile style, right? So I thought this was interesting, right? I thought this was interesting here, right? Now, I forget which particular language. I think it might be an African, one of the other African languages. Don't know it, but when I saw this and I read it, the English parts, I said, wow, do not cut the hair at the sides of your head or clip the edges of your beard. I got to figure out which Bible version people are using. They're using this version a lot, right? Right? Simple, right? Do not shave your hair, right? Simple, do not shave your hair, right? Shave, the operative word shave, right? One might trim something, right? But it's shave. Remember, shave is a razor, the razors with skin and all of that, right? But now notice this right here. I thought this was interesting. So Nana, right, they say equals hell, right? Heaven and hell. Now notice the one in the center. I don't know if he's Ashkenazi, probably, maybe Khazarian descendant, but there's something that the scripture says. It says, unless our righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, we will in no wise enter into, right, the Malkut Elohim. Let's bring that forward right here. So here's the verse right here, Matthew 5:20. For I say to you, in Matthew 5:20, for I say to you that except your righteousness shall exceed. Now the red letter, they tell us the red letter here is Yeshua, right? Yeshua HaMoshiach, right? Here, right? Is Yeshua speaking right here. Let's bring out this verse. For I say to you that except your righteousness, right? Your right choiceness, your righteousness, making the right choice, the way, truth, and life of the King of Kings Christ, Yeshua HaMoshiach, right? Shall exceed, right? The scribes and Pharisees, that which is of the righteousness, that is to say, that's of the scribes and Pharisees. The scribes, the people who write all these kind of books, right? And we're not against books for sure, but there's all kind of goofy books out there, these scribes, right? That is writing these books according to people's itching reading eyes. Like they have the teachers out there that appeal to people's itching ears, right? They cannot maintain, they can't receive sound doctrine, right? Healthy doctrine, healthy teaching, as we're focusing on this point. I know some ones will come in. I know sometime maybe the video will be a little long. One has other things to do, but please, like, share, subscribe. Also check in again. If you used to see a part of the video, maybe you're only able to watch a little part. Please return to hear the fullness, to hear the full content. Thank you for, subscribing, liking, and sharing the content, right? And also for those who support the ministry, with their gifts, their donations, who communicate with those who are communicating, the truth as well. Now, the scribes and the Pharisees, so what he says, you shall in no case, enter the Malkut Shamayim. You know what I mean? In other words, if these basic precepts, right, these basic, we could say inner and outer precepts, if we cannot maintain it, that's what it says, that narrow is the gate. Broad is the way. Broad is the way, right? So ones will grow the beard, but they still will mar the corners of the beard, especially where the beard and the side of the head comes together. We just showed you that already with the two exhibits that emphasize beard, right? But what about the Rosh Teferi, right? What about the Rosh? What about the head, the Ras? They ignore that, the head, right? Y'all shall in no case enter the Malkut, right? The kingdom of Shamayim. So here Yeshua is saying that our righteousness, right? Our righteousness must exceed that of the scribes, the scholars, the writers, and others that put out all these books. You know what I'm saying? Purpose-driven life and so forth and so on. You know what I'm saying? It's good to have a purpose, don't get me wrong. But you know what I'm saying? When the scribes now get a hold of that, and notice who Yeshua was calling out, those who should have known better. But here he says, unless our righteousness exceed that of the scribes and the Pharisees, right? Y'all shall in no case enter the Malkut Shamayim. So now look at the one in the center where it says heaven, right? Within the context. Notice how he has a full beard, right? Right? You got the hair on his head and the hair on his beard, on his face, the beard, right? The full beard right there, right? Now notice the black man on the right-hand side of the screen, right? You see what we was talking about, right? You see what's happening? Right? You see what's happening? Is there any rounding, right, of the, we can see it even at the top. We can see, I know this because, we had, some brethren over the years who were barbers and also, Rastafari, right? But that was their job. They would, cut heads, cut hair, right? And very, very skillful. I should always watch when they would make that round. I forgot what they call it. I'm not a barber, so I know that professional language. When they would round it, and shape it up. And you see how it's faded right there? You see how it's faded between the hair on the head, right? And you see the side, how the side is gone, and you see how the beard is faded, right? That's what it speaks about marring. That is the example of marring, to marring the corner of the beard. And then you see how the side of the head is shaved off. It's shaved. That's shaved right there, right? That's shaved, right? It's not like if one grows a beard and maybe get a little long over here and they may trim it down a little bit. I know for some of the ultra-Orthodox Rastafari, yeah, I get it, but understand the teaching. Give us a teaching of His Majesty. It's not just for the ultra-Orthodox, but it's for Kol Yisrael, for all of Israel, these basic precepts, right? The Nazarite, you can say principle of the vow is there, right? For all Yisrael, right? Not for these or for those, but for anyone that will seek to, according to what is written. I'm not saying that the practice of the precepts, right, is in effect under Aaron, right, but under our high priest, the Moshiach Yeshua, right, who's our high priest. But you can see where this is the same. The only difference is that his beard is not as full. So it seems like some brothers are picking up on it, right, are picking up on it. Some of them are picking up on, points of truth. But it could also be because those who are purveyors or alleged purveyors of the truth, right, are not giving you the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But how can they, right? Since they slander the elect of God, they slander, the royal order, right, of the Ethiopian Hebrews, all sort of slandering, right? The kingdom, right? The kingdom builders, right? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. This is fulfilling the will, teach the truth, right? So now some will say, well, that's a white guy, that's a white Jew, blah, 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 blah. I get that, but what did Moshiach say? He says, except your righteousness exceeds that, right, of the scribes or Pharisees, right? So if my righteousness is now being compared to the scribes and Pharisees, and it must exceed, be more so, right, than the scribes and Pharisees. I got to understand, well, what do the scribes and Pharisees, even Yeshua says elsewhere, he says, whatever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but not according to their works, because they say one thing and do another. Right? But see, here I can't even just apply this to so-called the European or Ashkenazi or some, the other Jews. I got to apply this, right, to our own people, right, to our own people, right, when we look at the epicenter of the word, what the word is saying to us. You know what I'm saying? What the word is saying to us. But now, notice this right here, the contrast. Now, are we saying that the brother over here should grow a full beard like that? No, we're not saying that he has to be so-called righteous. So we said, unless one's righteousness exceed, it's not like we have to be so-called fanatical, right? But it's being right and accurate and understanding what the scripture is saying. Too many of the Israelite brothers are like in a competition to, they want like the other Jews to have to acknowledge. Does it matter whether they acknowledge or they don't acknowledge? What matters is whether we act on the knowledge, right? On the knowledge. You know what I mean? It's like we will say these things, but we're afraid to really fully walk it out, right? Or tell the brothers, yeah, man, cutting off the sides right there, that's marring the corners. No, oh, bro, you got your beard, that's cool. Right? So what it is like we're doing a little bit of what Torah says, but we still are stuck in the world. It's like we are in the world and still trying to be a little bit of the world. I'm saying being of the world in their ways. Because all these kind of customs come from our non-Israelite, traditions of other peoples. That's why they call it like the Caesar. When somebody get a Caesar, a what? A Caesar, a Kaiser. You get a Kaiser, you call it a Caesar. We know it as Kaiser, like Cesare Borgia, right? A Kaiser. Now notice this black guy over here. He's way off there. And what's up with this baldness of the heads, right? What's up with this baldness of the heads amongst black people? right? I know some men might be losing their hair or, some areas of their head, and they just decide, forget it. I'm just going to shave the whole thing. Come out of her, my people, right? Come out of her. Now look at this. He's like a little baby. He's like I don't know what, right? And this is like a style. Right now, of course, I think this is maybe over in the continent, right? Don't know. I don't think he's a Hebrew, or Israelite. Well, I know he's not, because he would at least have a beard, even if he was slightly balding. He probably can grow hair on the head, but he shaves it like he's a leper, right? Is he a leper that was clean? Even the leper that was clean or the priests that were consecrated, yes, they had to shave their head and their beard and their hair off their body. But then after they come into the order, right, then they would grow their hair again. You see what I'm saying? So let's understand that it's like a rite of passage, that complete shaving, right? Or if you have some dis-ease, right? A sign of some dis-ease, or perhaps there's some sort of sickness that is producing this. But the sickness is not so much a physical sickness, it's a mental, a spiritual sickness, right? Even though he is building cathedral, right? The Bible says that Ghana's president, right, this guy there, the Nana, right, will go to hell simply for shaving all his hair off. Well, I won't say just for shaving all his hair off, but keeping all his hair shaved off. Is he a leper? Does he have the nigga? Does he have a nigga sarat? Does he have a nigga sarat? Right? The plague of leprosy, and he's being cleansed or something? Is he becoming a priest? We can show you in the Torah where the priests would also have to shave off all their hair, right? But then afterward, they don't have to keep themselves permanently shaved. That's going back to Mitzrayim, right? To the Tawi called ancient Egypt, the Kemet so-called. Our leader, right, or dealers, the leaders or the dealers, right? They make a deal with the devil. The dealers, they play with our mind, right? And they give you a bunch of half-truths. We need factories, not cathedral. Building more churches and universities. What did Burhana Selassie, Bob Marley say? Right? Burhana Selassie, right? Building more churches and universities. Was it churches and universities? Right? Graduating like what, thieves and murderers, right? Ghana youth should wake up right now, right? Big up to Ghana, right? MOT, her 44. This was from Evangelist Adai. Adai brought this out right here. And we saw this before, and when we was doing some of our research, we picked this up again. Just wanted to share this comparison right there. Because one might look at the so-called white guy, maybe he's a Jewish guy, European Jew, Ashkenazi, we don't know. You know what I'm saying? Well, let's just say he is. And say, oh, look, that guy, you want to follow. That's why I showed you the biblical verse there. Whatever they bid you observe, right? That observe and do, right? Because what don't do after their works, right? That's like the pastors and the preachers. See, we have to apply this not to us studying our ancient roots, even Judaically, but applying it to the so-called black pastors and preachers, right? That's who that word is really applied to. Oh, I didn't bring that word out for y'all just yet. Right here, here. Let me see if we can bring this out right here. Okay, over here, right? It says for the ministration of condemnation. For if the ministration of condemnation, right, was glory, much more doth the ministry of righteousness exceed, right? Exceed in glory, right? Whatever they bid you, right? They bid you observe, right? Observe, right? And do. Let's look up this verse right here, right? Here we go. Matthew 23:3. All therefore whatsoever, right, they bid you observe. So if they point to the scripture and the Bible, we can read it and understand it for ourselves. And it says for us to observe something that we should observe according to Mashiach and do. right? Knowing the truth, you know what I mean, of that matter. But do not y'all after their works. After their what? After their works. So even Yeshua here is speaking about their ergon. Their ergon. Don't do after their business employment. So the pastor and the preacher will speak about, Jesus, will speak about salvation, speak about the Bible, speak about the word, that we should observe, right? Because in the Bible, it's the scripture, the word, but don't do after their business, their employment, right? Because their business and employment, right, is just to use the word, right, to gain filthy lucre, to not build the kingdom of heaven because they have not entered in. They have not entered in, right? Because the basic precepts, right, the basic precepts they have not done, right? We're talking about the basic precepts. Then we're talking about Shabbat, right? You mean you can't work 6 days, or at least most of the days, you can say, quote, 5 or so, but the principle, work the majority of the week, 6 days, and rest on the Shabbat day, right? Now, of course, there may be situations in life where we may not be able to, but the principle, right? The principle, right? So here, the principle of this, he says, but do not after, right, their works. So here he's speaking about the scribes and the Pharisees and the religious leaders. Because notice, everything we're pointing to is here in the Bible, not just Old Testament, but we're here in New Testament. Let's point that out to you. We're here in the Brit Chadasha, right? All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, right? Shamar, Shomer, right? Observe and do. Asa, Isay, Isu, right? Ta'asu, right? To do. But do not, don't do. Right? So here in this, Yeshua Robenu, our rabbi, the rabbi of rabbis, he gives us a positive command, right, to observe and to do. And then he gives us a negative command, but don't do, right? Right? Ta'ase, to do, lo ta'ase, ta'asu, to do, lo ta'asu. Don't do, y'all, right, after their works. After their works, right? Why? Why does Moshiach, Yeshua HaNotzri, Jesus of Nazareth, say, for they say, right, like a lot of the preaching pastors, they say, love the Lord, do what he says, obey him, and, love Jesus, and, they say these things, but they don't do, right? See, this is what Yeshua is saying right here, right? Let's just go on a little bit here. For they do what? What do they do? For they bind, this is the work they do. They bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne. The prosperity pimps and the counterfeit filthy lucre doctrine. Now, we're not saying that money is evil, but we say that the love of money, right, and seeking to worship God and mammon, right, instead of worshiping Eloheinu with our mammon, with what we have, serve his work. What's that work for us? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, right, thy will be done, thy kingdom come in earth as it is in heaven, right? So they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, putting on the people all the guilt trip, right? And what it says, he came so that we may have life and life more abundantly, right? And lay on men's shoulders, right? And they lay them on men's shoulders, right? On like other men's shoulders. You see what I'm saying? But they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. It's like the pastor and the preachers, they come to the people and they say, not the pastor and preacher, I don't want to just generalize, right? But the counterfeit, right, Christian pastors and preachers, they come to people and say, the Lord say we need to do this, we need to do that, so all of you are giving me your money because the Lord told me to get a new plane or a new train or whatever else like that, right? Or we need to build up the church or get a new church, going to build a bigger cathedral or something else like that, right? So it's from your money, the people of the land, the little poor people, right? And that's just for them to continue to bind heavy burdens, grievous to be borne, and lay them on your shoulders. But what don't they do? They don't move one of their fingers. Notice something. When they need something, they come to the people, right, and put this burden on you, but they themselves, right? What about when you go to the pastor and the preacher? Well, I can't pay my bills. I can't pay such and such. And you've been given to that church. Will they have a little something there for you? Right? You know what I mean? I'm talking about those people, there's people who do this religiously, right? Have given thousands of dollars. You see what I'm saying? But if they were to fall into stress or duress, would the pastor or the preacher, right? So they come to you when God told them something, right, to get it from you, right? But then when you go to them because, they, because of who they say they are, will they even move one of their fingers? Not two of their fingers, right? So right here, this is kind of pointing out their works, and all their works, right, they do to be seen of men, right? To be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments. So here, Yeshua is not even saying that the phylacteries are wrong. You know what the phylacteries are? So remember, this is the first century, right? The phylacteries, let's bring this out. The phylacteries are, phylacterium. The phylacterium, right? It's a fortified place. It's a preservative or safeguard, an amulet. The Yehudi, right? Ha-Yehudim use this word to describe small strips of parchment on that were written passages, the following passages of the law of Moshe. So here we're talking about like the tefillin, right? When they bind the tefillin, like the strap on the left arm, and also the phylactery, the cube, the box on their forehead, you know what I mean? Or when they wear the fringes, right? And the borders of their garment, they make it big. They exaggerate it. I've seen that among some of the the ain't right Israelite camps as well, with their quote so-called fringes. But these are the verses: Exodus 13, 1 to 10, Exodus 13, 11 to 16, Deuteronomy 6, 9, 4 to 9. That's the Shema there. Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu Yahweh Echad. And Deuteronomy 11, chapter 11, verses 13 to 21. Right? So the phylactery is basically, like you see Orthodox Jews that would strap on the left arm, the strap, and have the phylactery box, the cube, on the forehead and all of that, and also have the fringes, right? But they exaggerate these things. That's what Christ, Moshiach, is saying. They exaggerate these things, and they enlarge the borders of their garments. So they exaggerate, phylactery pieces of parchment. So it's like scriptures that are written down on pieces of parchment, and these are rolled or placed within those phylactery boxes on the arm, namely the left arm, and on the forehead, right? That contain sentences, right? Or the Divrei Torah, right? Generally speaking, the words of the Torah, as we have pointed out right there. So we wanted to bring this forward right here, where Moshiach says this to us, right? Keep it in simple text right there. All, therefore, whatsoever they bid you observe, right? Observe and do. But don't do after it works. So it's a difference when they observe, right? They say Torah studies, right? Let's observe that. Let's do that, right? Keeping the Shabbat. Let's observe that. Let's do that. Doing good. Let's observe that and do that. Building community. Let's observe that and do that. But don't do after their works. What are their works? Their works are hypocrisy. For they say, right, but they don't do. And they bind these heavy burdens and grievous to be borne and lay them on men's shoulders, on other people's shoulders. Their followers are foolers. They're foolers. But they will not move them with one of their fingers. So they put a heavy load on you and say, yeah, you got to bear this, you got to carry this, right? But they would not even move their finger to do it themselves. Right, so right here. I know we're a little over on time on this one right here, right? But here we go. This is another interesting example, right? They say spread the love, right? Do not cut, right? The hair at the sides of your head, or clip off the edges of your beard. Now, let somebody thinks, well, this is all outer. It's to be seen. Your beard is to be seen, and your head. Well, yes, that's exactly. But that's what Yahweh, right? Elohim Ha'ab, God the Father has said. And notice what Moshiach was talking about, right? He did not condemn it, but he said that they exaggerated. He didn't say, oh, well, they grow the beard and your beard is to be seen. Of course the beard is to be seen. Moshiach had a beard, right? And, well, he has a beard. Let's put it like that. You know, y'all shall not round the corners of your heads, nor neither shall thou mar the corners, the sides, the corners. These are some other examples of this here. Now notice, what is the difference between what we just showed with the Israelite and the black man, right? Israelite, and with this right here. You see the same thing? You see how the beard is? You see how the beard is? Right? It's marred at the corners. Notice where the corner of the head meets the beard, it's marred. Right? Right here. Right here. Notice this right here. It's like a Philistine cut. Right? And then we have, you know, the tattoos. Now I know sometimes people come into truth after they have gone in the wrong. Now here, this is interesting right here. Here is showing us, notice what it's showing us. The corners of the beard, right? What are the corners of the beard, right? What are the corners of the beard, right? Now, notice that's the same area we was pointing to right there, right? You see where the same area pointing to right there? Let's look at the script. Messiah's beard. Messiah's zakan, right? We know the Leviticus 19:27. Let's look at Isaiah Yeshaya 50:6. I gave my back to the smiters, and my cheeks to them that pluck off the hair, right? I hid not my face from shame and spitting. Now, this is the prophet Yeshaya, but if we look at this in its fulfillment in the Brit Chadasha with Moshiach, that shows that even the Messiah with the Messiah's beard, what they did to mock him, to ridicule him, right? Isaiah 50:6. You know, when Moshiach, Yeshua, was betrayed, right? And where he was, you know, smitten, hitten, beat, whipped, you know what I mean? Spit on, right? But also what is key is that they did what? What he said right here? He says that and my cheeks to them that plucked off my hair, plucking off the hair off of your cheeks, right? Marring, right? Messiah's beard, right? So to beard or not to beard, right? This is the question, right? Now, we notice this was interesting. This is from the British Army here, right? Barit in Hebrew means covenant. Some have made a kind of comparison with Brit, like Brit. We say Brit, like Brit-ish. Some say Brit. Barit in Hebrew means covenant, and Ish means man. So some, like the British Israelism, right? And some of course, the Hebrew Israelites have kind of remixed a lot of British Israelism, right? But that's another subject matter there. But here's what they say in the British Army. So even the British Army, very interestingly enough, is more in keeping with these precepts than many of the Israelite camps. It says only a full set beard will be allowed. And that's what it says right there. So if you're in the British Army and you decide to grow a beard, then these are the regulations. Only a full set beard will be allowed. The length must be between grade 1, 2.5 millimeters, and grade 8, 25.5 millimeters. So like the length of the beard, right? The beard, according to the British Army, must be trimmed off, right, of the cheekbones, right, and neck, right? No patchy or uneven, right, uneven growth, right? No exaggerated, right, colors, right? And then they give us this example here. So they show us which beard, right? This is the appearance policy according to the British Army, right? So one can either have the mustache, right, and looking at it from the left to right, right? Or one may have the beard and the mustache. You see like a brother right there in the center, right? He has more of a full beard, right, and mustache, and you see how the sides right there, the sides of the beard going up, meet the sides of the head coming down, and it's even. right? And then from a side perspective, you can see how it's a full beard, right? You see that? There is no marring or rounding of the corner of the head, right? The hair is full there, and there is no rounding or marring of the corner of the beard, right? You see how it's full there, right? So here is the British appearance policy of beard and facial hair. And from some of my brief research, this was, I think, at least 100-year or more policy. This policy was in effect for 100 or more years, right? 100 or more years, right? Now notice over here, these are strictly, right, forbidden, right? I want you to notice that, right? Where over here, there's these kind of, and brothers and sisters, if you got this kind of beard, I guess that's your choice, so be it, right? This is not personal. This is corporate Israel, right? So, and then you see this one in the center is trimmed down, and the one just have a little something at the bottom, right? But no mustache, and the sides are cut off. The center is trimmed down too low. It's like stylized. I guess that's the style. But here in the British Army, the appearance, right? In the appearance in the British Army, as you can see right here, just so you can see what I mean by the British Army, you see right there, the Army, right? The British, right? All right. So this is also, we could get into this a little bit more, but they said basically that one must have a full beard. So the full beard, right? And this is what the scripture is saying too, a full beard. If you're a man, if you're mature, have a full beard, right? But these are just other styles based on, so-called shape of face. And then we have the full beard over here, right? The full beard over here, right? You see that right there, the full beard, right? Yeah, extended goatee, right? Goat, right? This was interesting too, right here. How to grow the beard faster. There's some basic natural, organic techniques, to grow. I haven't spent a lot of attention on it, though sometimes I go through, more attentive times, but this is important, right? This is important right here, right? And the don't do's, right? Don't do this, right? To beards, right? Don't do this to beards, right? And then over here, patchy beards. Sometimes maybe our beards may not grow full. And it's basic, holistic, organic techniques. Now, one will say, well, why is the beard so significant, right? Why is the beard so significant? Notice over here, when we look at the ancient archaeology, let's go to ancient archaeology first. See the brothers here, the Israelite brothers right here, with the locks, with the full beards, right? This gives us a kind of a precept. Now, let's look at the colorized version. Look how close the beard is. It's right under the cheek, right? But look how close it is, right? Look how close, look how full it is. Look how untrimmed it is. Look how the corners of the head, are not rounded, right? It's full, right? They have a full, their hair is so full on their heads, right, that it comes right down, right, almost like right to their forehead, right? So here is another example, okay? We got there, just to show a couple examples of these full beards, right? So we should be learning from this, full beards, right? The full beards. There we go right there, full beards. All right. Now this is an interesting one too from ancient Egypt, right? It's likely that this is a Ivri or a Yehudi, right? Just based on that full beard. It's rare to see in Egyptian art someone with a full beard. I challenge you right now to show some Egyptian art where you find a lot of ones with full beards. Now notice the Israelites came out of Egypt. And let's also look at the false beards and the other kind of beards in ancient Mitzrayim. But then notice what Yahweh says in Leviticus to the Israelites to distinguish us, right, from them, right? Distinguish us from them, right? This example right here, like This is a basic kind of example. So you see how the beards were in ancient Egypt, just to kind of show you, right? So the Israelites coming out of Egypt, right? He had separated us from other nations, right? Other nations and their whimsical kind of customs, right? And then we have down here some examples of different kind of beards found in archaeology, right? Different kind of beards right here, right? Different kind of full beards, right? Notice that right there, right? Now this is the sides, right? To round the corners of your head, right? We can see that there. You know, she might not have this style now, but you never know, right? You know, if you still in the world and of the world, I guess you can't help yourself, right? The sign that your beard, now then there's a lot of goofy kind of stuff, sign that your beard is too big, right? Now, Torah-wise, there can be some cutting, but no shaving, right? And no marring, right? And no rounding. So if you look at what the scripture says concerning the head and the beards, right? I said it's not a fully detailed video right here, right? Now, what's interesting is that when you want to get into a little more on the word corner as it's used elsewhere, payah, here we have Leviticus 19:9-10, where it says, and when you'll reap the harvest of your land, thou shalt not wholly reap the corners of thy field. So when it's the harvest of our land, we'll leave the corners, the edges for the poor, right? You know, he said, neither shalt thou gather the gleanings of thy harvest. So we go through our harvest one time and just leave the rest. And thou shalt not glean the vineyard. So it's our own vineyard. We take the, you know, the first fruits, right? And things that fall or left behind, we leave it for others. And we don't, well, let's read on. Thou shalt not glean thy vineyard, neither shall thou gather every grape, right? Every grape of thy vineyard. Thou shalt leave them for the poor, right? And stranger. Ani, right? Yahweh Elohim. I be he who be your Elohim. So Yahweh signs off on this one. He says, I am the Lord your God, right? This is like where in a contract, you know, like there are contracts where there maybe like 50 pages, we'll say like 20, 30 pages. And every page or couple of pages, one would have to sign. So you'll find that a lot in the giving of the Torah, where there are passages like this, and there's a sign-off. The sign-off, I am the Lord your God in the English, right? You know, that is important to note that right there. So here, when it says corners of thy field, right? The corners of thy field in the Hebrew is the same word, right? So there we get a sense of what corners mean, right? Now, this is going on about the tattooing and other things, so forth and so on, right? Right? I noticed this was interesting. Manliness, let's zoom in on that. I want to share some of this with you for the outro. Manliness without a beard is dead. Show me your manliness without your beard, and I will show you manliness by my beard. This is a kind of an adaptation of James, right? What it says, James chapter 2, verse 17-18, right? And then over here, beards making ugly men handsome since the beginning of time. The bearded gospel of men, right? So this is interesting. I don't know about making, you know, ugly men handsome, but I do get the point, right? Do get the point. But this, from one of my kind of favorite Protestant, how can I say, Protestant preachers and scholars, there's some interesting, you know, breakdown on some things. And many things I agree, you know, but C.H. Spurgeon, I don't know how many of you know about Spurgeon, right? He said this, and I was surprised to come across this. Let's zoom in on this right here. He said this right here. He said, growing a beard, right, on growing a beard is a habit most natural, scriptural, manly, and beneficial. Growing a beard, right, is a habit most natural, scriptural, manly, and here's the key, the and is the key, and beneficial, right? So that's C.H. Spurgeon, right? Wanted to show that. 5 points of beardinism, right? The Israelites and beardism, right? Maybe we'll call it that, right? Total awesomeness, unconditional growth, limited trimming, right? Right here broken down to tulip, right? I for irresistible manliness, right? And the P for perseverance of the whiskers. Perseverance of the whiskers. There's that picture of the King Messiah, the elect of God, Kamal Haile Selassie, where, where he takes his whiskers and he kind of twirls the whiskers right there. It kind of remind me of that preservation of the whiskers. So 5 points of beard denism, right? Total awesomeness, right? Unconditional. You see somebody for a beautiful beard, you're like, oh, wow. You know what I'm saying? Unconditional growth, right? Limited trimming, right? Irresistible manliness and preservation of the whiskers, right? This was St. Augustine. I found this to be interesting. St. Augustine here. The beard signifies the courageous, right? The beard distinguishes the grown men. This is what I wanted to bring out. The beard distinguishes what? The grown men, right? The earnest, the active, the vigorous. So that when we describe such, we say, he is a bearded man. He is a bearded man, right? So the results are in, right? So this was interesting too, between some of the early, right, Protestant, preachers and pastors, right? And then some of the later ones, right? Bearded men makes better preachers. And isn't it interesting? Right? See the lack of the beard, right? And even the over short hairism, right? This is basically not the Hebrew culture, but the culture of the Greco-Romans, right? And in certain ways, following that culture would have you grow your beard, but still be marring the corners of your beard and rounding the corners of your head, right? Be that as it may, right? So this is interesting. Bad here evangelicalism, right? Bad here. Church business in front, health and wealth party in back, the Jolet, right? Modified Mullen, right? That guy always be smiling, right? Like there's something funny. Well, it is, right? Because you're keeping the truth from people, right? Suggested alternative haircut. Now the John Knox. To counteract the influence of the Jolet, Lloyd the barber recommends that Joel Osteen, right, aka the Samson of bad theology, sport the austere but charming look of the John Knox to ground him in a more biblical approach. Possible drawback, people mistaking him as a member of ZZ Top. Okay, right? So the beards of ministry. I thought this was interesting too, right? The beards of ministry, right? I'll leave this on the screen so one can still it. It's not a clear. I'll try to find a clear for y'all. A field guide for pastoral facial hair, right? So by doing these studies, you get to recognize that even something that is seemingly so simple, right, tells us more. Right, so we see the different kinds of so-called preachers that, and the type of beards, right, worn, right, and it's interesting those that wore the beards more according to the precepts, right. Then this one here, you've probably seen this one before right here, right. This one goes with the one above, right, when we talked about this right here. Let's go to this right here. So the men versus boys. Now, this brother has a full beard, no doubt, right? The man on the right there on the left side, right? It seems like he has the hair at the corner. We can't really see, but he does have a full beard. But this does make the point right here, right? Right? And then down here, we have, Idris Elba, right? Like beards do matter, right? Beards do matter. Beards do matter, right? Right there, those two verses there, So beards do matter. Israelites, beards do matter. Remember seeing this brother from The Wire right here. It was interesting seeing his full beard as well, right? Having a full beard as well, right? Right? Yeah, but it seems like the corners are kind of, yeah. But anyway, be that as it may, you know what I mean? But you can see right here where he focuses mainly on the beard. That's his own choice, but still be it as it is. But you can even see the maturity from when he was younger, right, in The Wire, and then the growing of the beard, right? You know, almost like it's kind of like a Spurgeon, right? C.H. Spurgeon beard right there, right? And this kind of cracked me up from crack.com, right? Will Smith is now older than James Avery, Uncle Phil, was at the beginning of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That's interesting, ain't that? He's older than James Avery, Uncle Phil was. But I notice this here, even he has the beard, still dealing with the bald head, right? They're still dealing with the bald head, but he has the beard, right? So right here, right? This is talking about the wool, right? Grow your wool. These brothers here with the check, they have their full beard. Notice that right there, the check, right? The ones with the check right there, right? And there we go, right? So here, beards of the Reformation. This was interesting. The deeper we went down the so-called bearded rabbit hole, so to speak, you had the Bullinger, right? The Calvinists, their beard, the Huss. This is speaking about some of the European or the Church of Sardis, right? The Church of Sardis, right? The Protestant Reformation churches, right? You had the Knox, the Luther, right? The Melanchthon, something like that. The Tyndale, right? Shame what they did to that brother there. How people were murdered and killed and tortured, right, for just having a Bible or reading the Bible, right? The Wycliffe and the Zwingli, I think it's Zwingli, something like that, Zwingli, right? Beards of the Reformation. I think that's probably 50 cents. It looks like him right there, but just kind of showing, the whole beard thing. But this is like, the trimmed up kind of beard, right? Don't cut your beard, right? Is it a sin to cut or trim your beard? The scripture does not say, oh, it's a sin directly, but by context, it is not good, right? There might be a purpose or a reason to cut or to trim, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? But, getting into a habitual, the clean-facedness is not good according to the scripture, right? But sometimes it might be necessary, right? For health or other reasons, right? To go through a kind of a cleansing phase or stage. A man, I thought this was interesting right here. A man, right, without a beard, right, is like a lion without a mane, right? So there's a lot here on the beard. Another Israelite, right? Unite is IsraelUnite.org. This is from the IUIC, and you can see where there's an emphasis on beard, right? But there does not seem to be the emphasis like up here. If you notice this brother over here, you see how the sides are shaved, and it doesn't seem as though IUIC or Bishop Nathaniel or them are even talking about that. Maybe they might, because I see some things they are, I won't say changing, but becoming a little bit more accurate on some things, but still holding to other things. Hopefully they reconsider this right here, that yes, it's good, the beard there, right? But still look at the head. What about the head, right? What about the head? Which one is more important? I'm going to say more important, but he says the head. So they'll quote the verse, right? You see how they quote the verse, but the verse have both the head and the beard, but they focus on the tail, right, of the point, the tail of the verse, and don't give any emphasis to the rosh or to the ras, right, to the head, right. Well, they do in this sense of the shaving, right, as you can see, shaving, right, the shaving, yeah, right. Don't make baldness on the head. They focus on that. So they focus on the baldness on the head. They focus on the beard, but not on the rounding of the corners of the head. All right. Now this was interesting too, right there. The beard, all right, the full beard, all right, the beards in the Bible, all right. Some churches teach beards are wrong, right, and some churches are wrong, right. I mean, are they, what kind? Well, first of all, they're a church of what? Of who? Right? Of Yeshua, right? Of the Bible. Well, yes, beards is biblical. Beards is clearly biblical, right? It's clearly biblical, right? The significance of the beard is a God-given sign of gender distinction and maturity. This is probably should be a whole video in and of itself, but it's a God-given sign of gender distinction, right? And maturity, right? Better start growing the beard before they try to have some law. In the sense, they do have certain things where sometimes people feel forced to, cut their beard, right? To compromise, right? Men embrace your natural baldness, right? The natural baldness. Natural baldness is a clean thing in the words of God. Men, if you are balding, do not go and shave your head bald. Again, men, if you are balding, do not go and shave your head bald. I know this is a very popular worldly thing to do, but that is following the world. All right. So, okay, the beard command. Right? The beard command. Right? Do not cut the sides. Okay, we got that verse right there. Right? And here. So here it's not shaving or marring, but it's a somewhat of a trimming. Right? And according to Torah, one may trim, but to shave, right, or make baldness on the head, right, is not wrong, right? And therefore, brothers and sisters and brothers right here, right, ye shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. And I hope and pray that I fulfill this word, and brought forward the truth as right and accurately as possible. So, in closing, let's strive, right, to enter in at the straight gate. For many I say, right, for many I say to y'all, will seek to enter in and shall not be able to enter in, right? So don't follow the broad way, right? The broad way, but narrow is the gate that leads to life. Lastly but not leastly, here some quick examples of, letting it grow full, just in this, man style, but just to bring out the point. You see over here on the left hand side, correct, on the right hand side, wrong right there, and then over here the same, right? The same is true, right? Just to give us an example, right? Not saying these are Israelites, but just to give an example of what the Torah is speaking and what it means, chaverim, right? So the peyat, zekancha, right? The peyat, right? These weapons, instruments. Oh, be careful, be aware, beware.
Lion of Judah Society.